Great. Okay, so before we kick it off, I just want to again thank you for joining our webinar on teaching assignment data. This is the second in a series, and I'll discuss what that series is in a moment. But I want to share the results of our poll. So thanks to those of you who filled out our poll. I'm now going to share the results to see who's here. Thumbs up if you can see these results. Great. Thank you, Giselle. Okay, so who is here? Thank you for, again, filling it out. We have a lot of advocates here. 50% of you identified as an advocate. More than a fourth identified as an organizer. Thank you to the families who are joining today, 17%, parents, guardians. We'll have to maybe change our time so more students can make this webinar next time. But thank you also to our community members and our educators, and to those, everyone else who's here today. Okay, what region are you joining from? We have, well, we know Southern California is quite large, so 61% in Southern California. Quite a lot of you joining us from the Bay Area. We have some folks from the Central Valley, welcome, and other amazing places in California. Thank you all for being here. And lastly, why did you join this webinar today? Amazing. We have for the love of data. We do love data. We have a lot of folks joining to better support students, families, and teachers in their communities. A lot of us who are looking to better construct statewide solutions to supporting teachers. And some of us who need to be here or have another wonderful reason. Okay. I'm gonna stop that share. And we're gonna get started. So this is the second in a series of webinars. We are going to focus today on the different ways that we can analyze teaching assignment data so that we can foster conversations either at a statewide or local level to support teachers and their students. Last May, we had one focused on what the TAMO data set was, and we will include a refresher or access to information to refresh our memories on that later on in this webinar. We'll have another webinar next spring and next fall that are focused on solutions and how to leverage key policy opportunities. Next slide. Our purpose today is to share the findings of the equity analysis that EdTrust West has led, and by way of creating a new data tool that allows us to explore teaching assignment data in a variety of ways. We can drill down to the school level, which is really exciting. So that's our purpose today, to dig into the data tool and to dig into the findings of that equity analysis. We hope that after today, you'll have a better understanding of equity gaps in access to fully prepared and properly placed teachers. And we also hope that you leave today knowing how to use this data tool to explore the maps, explore the data, and address any equity concerns locally, statewide. Next slide. So next, I'm going to pass to my colleague at Education Trust West, Melissa, who will lead us through some context setting and also point us to how we can access this data, the data that we get from the California Department of Education on teacher preparedness. And after that, we'll dig into the new tool, which Krista will lead us through. After that, we will get into breakout rooms so that we have time to explore the tool and look at the data in a variety of ways. And then we'll come back, do a share out and a wrap up, and conclude our webinar at 5. We also will have a survey. So if you can stay to the end, it will be a short survey. We really appreciate that. So with that, I'll pass to Melissa thank you all for being here again today to support teachers and their preparation.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Angie. So I am going to attempt to share my screen if folks will bear with me. Technology is always a fun thing to navigate. All right, so I am by no means the star of this show, so I'm going to try to go fast, but not too fast because we have translation going on simultaneously. But I do want to make sure that we provide some context for these data before Krista walks us through what is the star of the show, which is the data tool that allows you to interact with this information. So I think I may be preaching to the choir with this group, but we know from a really robust and long-standing set of research that teachers are the most important school-related factor that influences student achievement. There's a host of information and evidence that shows us that the quality of teacher that is up there in front of a classroom of kids is really the most important thing that's going to determine whether those kids succeed, how much they grow and learn in a given school year. We also know that having more experienced teachers increases student achievement across the board, and it's especially important for closing equity gaps and improving outcomes for students who our systems have historically marginalized and done a poor job of serving, including students of color and students from low-income households. So I think people have heard, the term teacher shortage, and a lot of us work to advocate to address teacher shortages, but we thought that as part of this conversation, it made sense to kind of add some nuance to the conversation around teacher shortage. So we did that by just kind of showing three facets of the shortage that we think are important for us to consider. One is quantity. So when there are too few teachers to fill open spots, our schools are left with vacancies. And that's a really important dimension of the shortage, right? There's just not enough teachers in the pipeline. The second dimension that teacher shortages can take, which is what a lot of the conversation today is going to focus on, is quality. So in order for us to have a healthy education system that's serving our students well and that's, the quality that they deserve, we don't just need our quantity of teachers to be, to reflect the number of students we have. We also need those to be fully credentialed teachers who are placed in the right classrooms, meaning they're teaching the subjects that they're actually credentialed to teach. And they're teaching the student groups that they have kind of like the pedagogical training and licensure to teach. So you need, the training to teach bilingual students, you need the training to teach students with special needs. Your credentials need to line up with both the student groups and the subject matter that you are teaching in order for us to feel as though we've met that quality bar. And finally, we're not going to talk about this a lot today, but we'll talk about it, I think, further in the series. Another really important dimension of the teacher shortage that EdTrust West and public advocates have been focusing on as well is diversity. So even if we have enough teachers and they are high quality teachers, if those teachers don't reflect the racial and ethnic demographics of our students, which is incredibly rich in California, then we're still doing a disservice to them and we haven't fully addressed the shortage. So all three of these dimensions are important, but like I said, today we're going to be talking a lot about quality because we're focusing on a data set called the Teaching Assignment Monitoring Outcomes data set. I know that's a mouthful, but essentially what it means is the California Department of Education, starting last year, publishes data on those quality dimensions that we talked about in the last slide. So whether a teacher is placed in front of a classroom that aligns with what they are credentialed to teach in terms of subject matter and student groups. Touched on this quickly in the last slide in terms of timing. This is just really exciting because I think, for those of you who attended the first webinar that we hosted on this data back in the spring, we only had 1 year's worth of data out then. Now we have 2. And because this is something that's required by state law, it's going to continue to be published on an annual basis, which is really exciting because it'll allow us over time to see if we're making progress as a state in actually addressing these problems. And we know that we can look forward to this data being published with reliability. There are a few limitations that we want to mention really quick before we start to explore the data. One is that, as I mentioned, we only have 2 years. It is exciting that there'll be more information in the future, but in terms of longitudinal analysis, like being able to look at change over time, we are a bit limited in that sphere right now, right? Because we only have 2 years. The other thing is because this is a relatively newly published set of data, there are still some errors that districts are dealing with as they and their staff learn what the different definitions within these data mean. So the California Commission on Teacher Credentialing and the CDE are working together to make sure that those errors are corrected before the data is put out into the world. But I think that's still something that is a little bit of a work in progress. All right. So how can you get your hands on this information? How can you access the TAMO data? So I'm going to stop sharing my slides for a second and attempt to take you to the actual web page where you can see some of this information for yourselves. And Alfie is also going to drop in the chat a resource that you can use to kind of navigate to links yourself. And Andrew, John, can I just get a thumbs up that you're seeing DataQuest now and not slides? Awesome. Okay, so the first place that it is most easily accessible, that this TAMO data is most easily accessible for folks is through DataQuest. So this is the state's kind of easy to navigate, point and click aggregation of all the different kinds of data on teachers, schools, and educational climate. On this first page of DataQuest, to get to this data, what you're going to do is put in state when you select a level. You can, if you'd like more granular information, go to the county, district, or school levels. I'm putting in state just so we can see the whole thing. For subject, you go into staff assignment data. That's what's going to take you to the TAMO data set. Hit submit. You'll have a choice between years. I have the most recent year automatically pulled up. And then you can choose whether to get information just completely in the aggregate at the state level, or if you want to append county data on there as well. I'm just going to show state really quick. And if it loads, there we go. What you're left with is a chart that gives you pretty granular information about the percent of teachers who are clear. And we'll talk a little bit more about that definition of what it means for a teacher to be clear in a second. As well as other designations of teachers for each subject area. So you can really do a bit of a drill down there. If you are a researcher or a more technical or wonky person and you chose that, like, I'm here for the love of data, answer to the first poll, you may want to download the full data sets that contain this information, and those have different levels of aggregation. So you can find information at the school, district, county, and state level in there. And those can be found here. If you Google CDE and teacher assignment monitoring outcomes data, this is the page that should pop up, and you have those downloadable data files, which are in, I think, Excel format. So go forth and download and interact with data. So I'll kick us back to our slideshow. All right, and now we get into those definitions really quick before I kick it to Krista. So this is really important. These are a little bit opaque. So like Angie said at the beginning, if you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to put them in the chat or raise your hand. We want to make sure everyone's on the same page here. And this is definitely, you know, we want this to be kind of a learning community rather than us talking at you. Oh, John,
Melissa, there's a request for the second link to be reshared.
Yeah, sure. I don't have that handy right now, and I don't know if Alfie has it, but I will drop that in the chat as soon as we switch to Krista's slides.
I can help with that too. Melissa, there was also a question if you can touch on, is there like a correlation between having a credential and having experience? Like the term being a credentialed teacher versus an experienced teacher.
Oh, that's such a great question. So there's a little bit of a relationship there. I mean, in order to gain experience, you need that credential. But I think it is important to differentiate the fact that we are not seeing information about years of experience in this data set. That is critical information, and there's a ton of research that the more experience a teacher has, the better their student outcomes are, essentially, the better their performance is. But that information is housed in a different data set that the California Department of Ed has not published in the last few years, which is demographic data. We've been advocating pretty fiercely for them to resume publication of that because of how important it is, and it would complement this credential data beautifully, but it's not actually in this data set. I hope that answers your question. Awesome. So I will quickly go through. So when we talk about someone being clear or a teaching assignment being clear in these assignment monitoring outcomes data, What we mean is that a class section or course is taught by a fully prepared and properly assigned teacher. So essentially this one word sums up that a teacher has been properly placed and fully prepared for the kids that are in front of them, that quality dimension we were talking about. So it's a variable that we're going to look at a lot today, because the percent of clear teachers, you really want it to be at 100. You want all of the teachers in your school or district to be fully credentialed for the kids and the subjects that they're teaching. And that's essentially the goal, so we're shooting for. The couple other categories that show up in there is interns. So these are teachers who are on an intern credential. They're learning and working their way towards that kind of fully credentialed clear status, but they haven't completed that progression yet. And then we have another category for ineffective, which the state has defined as the teacher not having the credentials or permit to teach the class. And I think it's important to note that we've seen these increase, like these kind of short-term or emergency permits have increased in the last several years. And the number of kind of full credentials that teachers are earning as they complete prep programs has decreased. So those are some of the dynamics at play that are contributing to a shortage. All right, this one gets tricky. These data, it's just important to note, are not provided by individual. So when we talk about the percent clear, we're not talking about the percent of individual teachers who are clear to teach their courses. We're actually talking about the courses or the classes themselves, because you could be a teacher who's credentialed, for example, to teach math, and 5 of your 6 course sections, you're teaching math, you're clear for those 5 out of 6 course sections, that's great. But the 6th section, you know, the school that you're in really needed a English teacher, and you're not credentialed to teach English, but they have you filling that slot. That would mean that essentially 1 out of your 6 course sections you are not clear for. And by presenting the data in this FTE format, we're able to get insight into the fact that that one individual is clear for some of their classes and not clear for others. So we have some example slides from the first webinar that we did that go much deeper into that we can also share out for folks if that's confusing. All right, what does this mean for equity? This is the question that we are truly most concerned with at the end of the day. So the tool that Krista is going to take you through, we're really excited about, because it begins to answer that question of what do these data tell us in terms of how well we as a state are providing access to fully qualified teachers for our students in California. Just a few of the questions that we ask with this tool, and that we would love to make sure that advocates, families, community members, educators, essentially all of you guys, and especially policymakers are able to understand and answer is, do students from low-income households disproportionately lack access to these clear teachers who are properly credentialed and assigned? Do students of color and multilingual learners lack access to them? So are we seeing disproportionate access to these teachers? And then are there school types or subject areas, like high schools and elementary schools, subjects like I think we do see higher shortages in math and English, for example, where this is most severe? So to answer those questions, we paired the TAMO data with student demographic data, and that is what Krista's going to walk us through. So I'm going to stop sharing my slides and kick it to her. Thank you, guys. And I'll pause quickly. Are there any questions that we want to answer before we get into the tool?
None in the chat.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Krista Capuzza. I'm a data analyst at EdTrust West, and I will be sharing my screen and sharing the data tool. Can folks see my screen okay? Okay, awesome. So this is the landing page when you click into the link that takes you to the ETW website where it's housed. So it has some context and definitions that Melissa shared, walked us through. And then here is the tool itself when you scroll down a bit. And so I'm going to take you through just how to use the tool, and then I'll also focus on a simple example district to take us through and understand how we can explore the data using this district. All right, so starting off with the tool, just at a glance, it is a view of the California state map. And each district is color-coded according to the statewide average of clear percent. So districts that are in orange have a lower percent of clear teaching assignments than the statewide average, which is 84%. And then districts in blue have a higher percent than the statewide average. And so just demonstrating some kind of functionality of this tool itself, we can hover over the map and we see this arrow that pops up. And we can click into different functions. So this first one allows us to kind of select a specific area. So say I want to look into the Bay Area specifically. I can drag and zoom in on the Bay Area, and I can see all of the districts within the Bay Area itself. I can also hover over any district, and I can see the county, the district name, the teaching assignment broken down by clear, intern, and ineffective percents. And then I can also see the student demographics. So I can see percent of major racial groups, as well as low income percent, English learner percent, students with disabilities percent, and the enrollment total. Also, when I click into a district, I'm going to reset it here. Okay, I'm gonna scrap that. Going back to this arrow, I can click into this compass looking thing, and that will allow me to drag and maneuver around the map itself. And then if I ever want to reset it, I can click on this home button and I'll reset to the default view. Okay, and then on the left here, I have some filters if folks wanted to explore specific counties or districts. So for example, if I'm looking at West Contra Costa, I'm interested to see the county at large. I'm selecting Contra Costa County, and then I can see how it is coded in relation to the other districts in the same county. And again, can hover over them. If I want to focus on just one specific district, I can type it into this filter at the bottom, the district name filter, and I'll zoom in on that district itself. And again, if I ever want to reset, I can click on this funnel and this X next to the filters, and it'll retake me to the map. Now on the right, we can use these other filters to kind of explore distribution across the state. So I have two filters that look at clear percent and ineffective percent. So say I want to look at the districts that have a higher than the state average clear teaching percent. I can filter it for 84% to 100%. And now I'm only seeing the districts that are blue that have that higher than the statewide average. Again, I can reset. I can do the same with ineffective percent. And then I can also filter by student demographic. So say I want to look at districts that have more than 20 or so percent Black students. I can set this filter to that. And then I only see the districts that have greater than 20% Black students, and I can see kind of how they're coded. So definitely encourage folks to play around with these different filters, just explore, see what patterns you note, what emerge, where different districts are located, how they're color coded for all these different student demographics. So again, we have Black students, percent Latinx students, percent English learners, and percent low income students. Okay. And then just a quick note that there is a list of LEAs that did not certify their data, and so they are not included in this tool. So if you are looking for any of them in the district filter, it will come up as blank, just a note. All right, any questions on this before I continue? Okay. All right, so this view is great for noticing kind of patterns across the state, but then the next few tools will help us dig into district and school level data itself. So this next tab, and I just did that by clicking over at this top over here, this tab shows a state snapshot over time by teaching assignment, broken down by the 5 categories that we have. as well as by subject area. So we can see just over the course of the 2 years of data that we have, any kind of patterns or anything that we noticed changed over the 2 years by teaching assignment, and then also by these subject areas. Okay, moving into the next tab, the district comparison tab. Here we can see all the districts within one county. So again, if I'm using Contra Costa as my example, I'll click into Contra Costa and I can see all the districts within Contra Costa, and the color coding follows the same pattern. So if it's blue, it's higher than the statewide average, orange, it's below. The statewide average is also indicated using this green vertical line here at 84%. And then we also here have a district kind of comparison tool. So you can add in whichever district you like. It does not have to be from the same county if you want to just compare and see how they're doing. So again, I'll add West Contra Costa. It'll be added here. Similarly, I can hover over and see the breakdown of student demographics and the teacher assignment. And then if I want to remove any, I can just hit the X next to the name. All right, going into the district and school lookup tab. So this just plots the student demographics at the district level on the left here. And then we have the teaching assignment again on the right by the district level. And then at the bottom, we have school level data. So this is filtered right now for West Contra Costa Unified. It's filtered by the school grade span of all high schools. And it's also color coded by percent of low income students. So here we have the lighter the purple, that means the less concentration, or yeah, the less concentration of low income students it has. The darker the purple, the higher the concentration. So I can go ahead and remove this grade span filter just by setting it to all schools. And so now this shows me all of the schools within West Contra Costa. If I hover over the tool or each school, the tooltip pops up and it'll tell me school level demographic data. Again, I can filter back down the different grade spans. If I want to highlight just specific schools, I can also do that using this school name filter. So say I just want to look at Korematsu, I can go ahead and select that. Yeah, so here just would love for folks to explore and kind of notice any patterns that emerge when looking at this gradient. Okay, and then the last tool that we have, last view, is a set of scatter plots that plot the relationship between clear percent and different student demographic percent. So we have English learner percent, we have students of color percent, and percent low income students. So here we have each circle represents a school, and the color is also again consistent with how it's been. So if it's orange, it's below the state average. If it's blue, it's above. And then the size of the circle denotes the size of the school, so the enrollment and the number of students. We also have a line of best fit here that kind of goes through all the data points that are shown, and it tells you a little bit about the relationship between these two variables. So again, I have the same kind of filters of district, school grade span, and school name. So I think what's powerful about this tool is setting it to just all school grade span. So it includes all the schools within one district. And then you can really see some patterns emerge. And you can explore by school grade span type as well. And for the researchy folks, if you hover over the line of best fit, you can see the R squared and the p-value, but I'll leave that be for now.
Krista, Chase actually has a question of whether you could give a more technical explanation for the line of best fit, or
Yeah.
maybe they're both a technical and a non-technical.
Yes, I will try my best. So the line of best fit here, it basically is just a line that best fits the data points on this plot. So basically tells you just more about the relationship between the clear percent and English learner percent, for example. So here we can see that the line of best fit is trending down. So that means it has like a negative slope or an inverse or negative relationship. So we can kind of make the claim here that in this case, for this specific set of filters, the higher the percent of English learners as we move across this line, also the lower the percent of clear teachers. The same if we look at this example for students of color, we can say that as we move across this line, we increase our percent of students of color, but our clear percent is also going down. So you can say it's a negative correlation. Does that answer your question? Chase, yeah, these are great questions. It is just a Tableau model of just a very simple line of best fit. It is not accounting for differences in size, and it's just between these two. And so if you hover over that line, you can see the model that it created with that equation there. And then it just showed the R squared and the p-value as well.
Thank you, appreciate it.
No worries, great question.
Yeah, thanks, Trace. I just want to jump in really quickly and say, like, we are in the process of conducting analyses using these information for a forthcoming brief, and also have a little bit of ability to kind of iterate on these tools. So if there are any suggestions on potential kind of like improvements or additional nuances that could be added, that would be incredibly helpful too. Before this webinar was like talking to Krista about what might make sense in terms of going into technicality of explaining to people which p-values are significant and whatnot. It's very exciting to have someone asking about the technical stuff, so appreciate that.
Yeah, I see Chase also dropped in the chat that looking at LAUSD, you get kind of a nuanced picture here. And that's a great example district to pull because there's so many data points. And so definitely recommend for folks to spend a lot of time with this view and just explore different districts across California, especially places like LAUSD that have so many schools. And I think just some caveat that we want to add is we can also look at this at the state level by setting it just to all. So if we set everything to all, we get all of the schools within California. And we do have then the line of best fit for each of those kind of variables. And just to note that while these are statistically significant, the state kind of level does mask a lot of variation that's happening within districts and across different districts. And so really recommend digging in and using that district filter to explore more. And then another thing on the slope. So I think one thing to note is that the steeper the slope, you can say the stronger the relationship is. Then the flatter the slope, that kind of indicates that there is not much of a relationship, but may be worth digging into more. And yeah, some findings definitely emerged from this. We found that schools that have a higher concentration of English learners at the state level have slightly higher percent of clear averages than other schools. And here we're looking at students of color as a whole. And so this indicates kind of a flat line, which indicates like not much of a relationship between these two variables. But after conducting a separate analysis, looking at just percent of Black and Latinx students, we found that schools that have higher percent or the highest percent of Black and Latinx students have 3 percentage points less clear teachers on average than their counterparts. And then we also found that for that equity gaps in access to clear teachers are the most acute for students from low-income households. So again, we did a separate analysis where we found that schools with the lowest percent of low-income students have on average 5 percentage points more clear teachers than schools with the highest percentage of low-income students. So I think to say that simply in a different way, we found that the poorest schools have 5 percentage point less clear teachers than their wealthier schools. Definitely some huge equity gaps there.
Yep, and just in case folks are curious, those analyses were done using quintiles, so grouping, creating groups containing the same amounts of schools or districts. And we're happy to share more information about that as well if helpful.
Thank you, Melissa. Any other questions?
We encourage you to raise your hand if you'd like to say your question.
All right. I will go ahead and pass it back to Angie then for breakout groups. Thank you all.
Thank you, Krista. So we're ready to explore. While we have our colleague Alice start to put the breakout groups together, I'm going to show you what our questions are. But I just want to give a big thanks to Krista and Melissa and the team at EdTrust West and everyone who collaborated on this really powerful data tool. So let me go ahead and show you those breakout group questions. Okay. So we're going to get into about 4 breakouts. We're going to be in them for about 15 to 20 minutes. And these are the questions that we invite you to explore. We invite you, just like Krista and Melissa showed us, to go through the tabs, the different options, to look at the data and see if you can find those equity gaps or different equity gaps in your school, in your district, or you can look by county as you saw. You might find some equity gaps based on income or based on the concentration of students of color. And you can also look to see if there are some subject areas that are more impacted in terms of fewer clear teachers teaching those topics. So there is going to be a Jamboard that we're going to invite you to put your responses and any other observations that you make in your breakout sessions. And your facilitator will lead you through that. So I think with that, if there are no other questions, I think we'll start to get into our breakout groups.
Here's one question from Angelica. If there are any tips for looking at this on your phone?
That's a wonderful question.
I can share that unfortunately the
Thank
data
you.
tool is not super suited to look at on your phone. So would highly recommend using a desktop if you're able. But yeah, there's still some context in the EdTrust West landing page that may be helpful that you can view on your phone.
And if you are on your phone right now, we encourage you to stay on as part of the discussion, even if you can't see the data tool, if you're able. Yeah, maybe that is the next step. That's true. A lot of community leaders are relying on their cell phone. So thank you for that suggestion, Angelica. Okay, any other questions or suggestions before we jump into the breakouts? Okay, then I think we're ready. How was your time in the breakouts? Thumbs up? Yeah. It was good to have the opportunity to explore with our groups, and now we get a chance to, oh, by the way, I realized I never introduced myself. My name is Angelica Salazar, and I'm a senior policy advocate at Public Advocates. So apologies for not mentioning that at the beginning. Okay. So, shall we start with group one? Who would like to share out your findings, observations, or questions from group one?
think that's me. Though John, Valeria, Colleen, Vanessa, please add on if I'm missing anything. Lang with Address West. I think we had a lot of interesting, like we left with more questions and we had answers to the questions that we had. But we spent a lot of time exploring Woodland Unified in Tulare County down in the Central Valley, and also Stockton Unified in San Joaquin County. Really just, I think Valeria made the point that like there are a lot of like kind of similar contexts in the schools that she works with in Tulare. So she was really hoping to find some like exemplary school districts in the Bay Area or in LA that we can really like point to as success stories. So that was kind of what motivated our exploration. And then with Stockton Unified, we'll just share an interesting result that we identified was that there's one school, the special education department, which had 100% clear like teacher status. And so just wondering and like pleased by that and wondering like what it might have meant for that to be the case. Yeah, thanks for adding that on to Angelica.
Yeah, I think this is both an opportunity to find schools that need more support and also schools where things are going well, right? And so I really appreciate your share out, Lang. Who's our spokesperson for group two?
I don't know if I looked at the number of our groups. Can you tell us who was in group two, Angie? Is that possible? I
cannot.
Can just go.
Yeah, go ahead, Melissa.
All right, cool. So I had Devona, Chase, and Chelsea in my group. We looked at San Bernardino, and we looked at LA Unified a little bit. And I think, well, Chase or Chelsea, either of you want to jump in with any kind of like reflections from the group? I think one of the things that we noticed is that it's just a lot of data, it's a lot of information. So it definitely takes time to sit with and sort through. And especially with the scatter plots, it'll be important for folks to both kind of look at what's happening at individual schools and be careful with the interpretation of that line of best fit, because sometimes it's not actually significant. So while it's showing some directionality, it might not actually be telling telling the story that it looks like it's telling. So I think there might be some kind of scaffolding in that area that could be added to the tool possibly. But Chase and Chelsea, you guys want to add anything? And Devona, but I know she's on the phone. That's what happens when we don't assign people to share. That was my bad as a facilitator. But I think a couple other interesting things, we talked about, and Lang spoke to this a little bit too, like there are different types of schools. So when we think of like categories of school, like charters and kind of like alternative schools or option schools, we may see wildly different trends in terms of percent of teachers who are clear there, which is an equity issue, and which probably can be drilled down a little bit more here. So those are like looking at those specific categories will be important. And then thinking about inequities by labor market and types of geography will also be incredibly important. Like, what's happening with rural versus urban schools, and what does that mean in terms of how we tailor solutions for building strong teacher pipelines that address quality issues in those very different areas with very different contexts. I hope I faithfully reflected some of our conversation, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Melissa. Melissa's group. I think we talked about in our group too, this like rural urban dichotomy, and yet in a lot of urban settings, the price of housing is also a factor that we might see play out different, that will affect teachers, in the coming years. So Thanks for making that point, Melissa. Which group would like to go next? Don't worry about your number. Just go ahead and speak for your group.
I could go ahead and share a little bit more about what we talked about in our group. We focused on Pomona Unified School District, and we noticed that the percentage of clear teachers in that district, which is the district that our organization focuses on, was at 86%. And me and Evelia, who is also part of the organization I'm with, Gente Organizada, found that kind of interesting, I guess, to say, just because based on the data that we've received from the school district, there, and even like from our members, that doesn't seem to be reflected in like the community's like input of like how the schools are doing, and also looking at like Lexile literacy scores that the school district has provided for us. Almost every single school in that district is not at meeting the standard for those scores. So it was really interesting to see that they're being scored so highly in clear teachers when they're not, they're pretty much failing our students. And so that was something that we kind of found interesting, like how can you say there's such a high percentage of clear teachers when your own data is showing that you're not doing your students justice. That kind of brought up the question, like, what support do teachers need in order to raise those scores? And then we also thought about how teachers are leaving this year like drastically, and so that also wasn't reflected in this data tool. And so we were wondering like if that will be reflected within this coming year's data set, and like how that will change like everything else within it. And then something that was also brought up was if the teachers who are being labeled as clear in the data set are getting temporary permits to teach those subjects, and that is being like the justification for why they're being identified as clear, or if they're actually credited, have credentials within those subjects to be teaching. But yeah.
Any responses to what Vanessa shared, or thoughts?
Just that if they were on some kind of temporary permit, they wouldn't be labeled clear. They would need to be fully prepared for that subject class that they were teaching and the student population there. But yeah, good comments about clear it's a baseline standard we should expect all of our teachers to meet, or nearly all. But you need more than that to have a fully effective teacher.
Thanks, John. Others? And I know we have one more group that we want to hear from too. So if you're out there in that last group, feel free to chime in or respond to any of these share outs that we've heard today.
We didn't assign a share out person, which is also my bad since I was the facilitator, but I can share, and then please folks add in if I missed anything. But we had some really beautiful connections to West Contra Costa in our group, very serendipitously. So we did a deep dive into West Contra Costa. We looked at Deej Elementary, and we found that it is the school with the highest percent of low-income students, and it is definitely below the midpoint in terms of percent of clear teachers in relation to their grade span. We also had a good question about correlation and causation. And so do want to note that the line of best fit that we see, we can't really make any causal claim. So we can't say that, you know, the percent of low income students makes it so that the percent of clear teachers is lower. We can't say that, but we can just say that there is some sort of relationship. We also talked about like, how do we kind of determine a threshold for which like to be concerned about a district or a school? Is it just enough that they're below the state average, or should there be kind of a more nuanced kind of indicator that can tell us that? We also got the recommendation to break down the scatter plot for students of color into specific racial groups, which I think was an awesome suggestion to let us know a bit more about those relationships. And then we were just generally concerned about our district and the especially like a specific network of schools that are in the Kennedy family in that district. So, anyone wanna chime in from my group?
Thanks, Krista. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of comments in the chat kind of in response to what Vanessa shared and what John reinforced, that being fully credentialed and properly assigned is, you know, a minimum. And so what additional work do we need to do to support our teachers once they're in the profession, and knowing that there are other factors too that influence student learning outcomes, and you know, also saw a comment in there about cultural responsiveness, and being fully credentialed and properly assigned doesn't guarantee cultural competency. And you know, we can talk about also supports that teachers need there, or supports regarding school climate. You know, this is a just like check off if you have the credential and are properly assigned, and then further work needs to be done to ensure you're also properly supported, which is a different question. Any other questions for any of the presenters, or observations on the data tool in the last couple minutes that we have before we close out our webinar? Any findings or conclusions that anyone is inspired to share today?
I had a question because I thought the scatter plots were so interesting and useful. I want to spend more time. For the one, I might have missed it when it's like students of color. I didn't hear, do we have a further like information by student subgroup beyond like students of color? And is that just like a, you know, needing to use a different filter?
Yeah, it's a great question, Angelica. Definitely, I think a great next step for us to have is including that segregation for the scatter plot. The most we can do there right now, as it is if you hover over any school, you can get the demographic breakdown by race and by student group.
Angie,
Thanks.
maybe you could go back to that slide that shows the series of webinars. To Chase has a question about kind of what's next.
Sure. So while I get there, I can tell you what I remember, which is that the next webinar is going to be focused on solutions. What are effective and creative solutions to improve teacher preparation and diversity? As Krista and Melissa mentioned, this data set doesn't answer questions on diversity, and we know that's also a factor for student and student learning. So we'll raise some solutions, and you know, lots of folks are really focused on like teacher residency programs, grow your own programs. Maybe we can uplift a district that does a really good job on you know, having really enriching professional development, or just, you know, how are some districts effective and successful in not having vacancies. So we'll highlight some solutions in the spring when we meet again. And then about a year from now, next fall, we're going to then focus on how we would implement those things, and what key policy opportunities do we need to leverage to make those programs a reality, and accessible to districts. or those interventions and those solutions. So the next two webinars will be focused on solutions. This one and the last one was really focused on how we define the problem, how we can frame the problem, how we can look at equity and inform local conversations and statewide conversations. And the next two will be solutions focused. John or Krista, Melissa, want to share anything else on that?
I'll just add that, you know, some of that talking about solutions will definitely get at the educator diversity policy roadmap on that like diversity dimension. And so I'll drop that in the chat if folks are interested and haven't seen. And, you know, we'll also, I think, Angie, you alluded to this, but have some more concrete findings from the data that we kind of explored today as a group. I think a lot of what we wanted to make sure folks were able to today is drill down into their specific communities and local contexts. But we also do want to be able to equip people with some like really concrete, succinct findings from these data that they can use to talk about equitable access to fully prepared teachers. You can look out for a brief to that effect early next year.
Thanks, Melissa. Looking forward to that. Thank you, Elfie. So in the chat, there is a link to a feedback survey. If you can take a few minutes to please let us know how we did today, how we can improve this information, access to it, these webinars, and the data tool itself, that will help us in our learning in disseminating this information next time. Any last thoughts, questions, anything from the presenters? It's so lovely that we're ending on time and have time to do the survey. Before you log out, please take a moment to do that. And we appreciate you all for joining us today.